Well, there's new debate around congressional term limits and the age of America's politicians. After 81-year-old Congresswoman, she was missing 6 months of key House votes. Nobody knew where she was, apparently, but she was eventually found living at a retirement community. Texas Congresswoman Granger has been AWOL on the House floor for months. Her office claims that health challenges have made travel to Washington, quote, difficult. That's all they offered for an explanation. Meantime, her son telling local outlets that she's been dealing with, quote, dementia issues and has experienced a very rapid decline since moving into the retirement facility. The question here is, why are we just voted as recently as July, Kennedy?
Yeah.
July.
Yeah.
And she wasn't in Washington, and nobody bothered to check to see where she was. Dementia doesn't happen overnight. This has been someone who's been suffering from this for a while. She does, and her family say that she has declined quite a bit since September, but she voted in July.
Yeah, so why is she still holding the office? You know, it's like, what does it take to remove someone? Because that's an abdication of responsibility, and the people in her district deserve to be represented in Congress. If she can't do it, and she clearly cannot, if her son is admitting that she has dementia issues, then she shouldn't be serving. Step aside. I mean, what is the removal process like? We hear about, the 25th Amendment for the president, but...
Yeah, you have to vote on it in the House. But if that case was made, that I'm sure everybody would vote for it. Problem is, yeah, she was well enough to show up at Congress for the unveiling of her portrait. But as we were talking about, Nicole and I were talking about, she didn't vote that day because I don't think she was necessarily capable of voting. So, yes, look, the media never did its job. Mm-hmm. Constituents, I think, were misled by looking at her Twitter feed because she's continuing to post. Who was doing that? I think this... Of all the ethics reports out there, this demands an ethics investigation, because what was the staff doing? How were they responding to constituents?
How is that not elder abuse?
Well, how is that? That is so misleading to the constituents and the people that she represents in Texas.
First of all, talk about elder abuse, talk about misleading to the American public, because this is not our only elected official. Ever heard of Joe Biden? I mean, seriously. Joe Biden's mental decline has been of something that we've been talking about for a really long time. And Nicole, it's not just Joe Biden. It's Senator Mitch McConnell. It's Nancy Pelosi. Again, our president, who obviously has cognitive issues. Where do you draw the line? Because it's really irresponsible for these elected officials, right? But their families are condoning it, just like Jill Biden did for years and covered it up.
So it's obviously a very slippery slope what we're talking about here. Some people are saying call for term limits, which, that there's a valid argument for that in general, just to have normal turnover when it comes to our elected Congress. But then some people talk about, well, since we have a minimum age for presidency, maybe we should have a maximum age, which I actually don't agree with, because I think that, there's some sort of intelligence and experience comes with age. But it does come down to whether they are able to mentally and physically perform their job. And that goes beyond Congress. And what she has clearly demonstrated, the moment that they said that she has been struggling with dementia is the moment that she should have been taken out of her seat. Amen. Because she represents the American people. She was voted to be in there. It is a complete failure of her duty to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, the term limits are one thing, right? But like you said, you can't set a maximum age. And an 81-year-old could be very healthy, and then you could have another 81-year-old.
Well, you got Senator Grassley, who's like 90 and as spry as can be. I put him up against anybody. Yeah. But you had a Senator Feinstein who was pretty much incapacitated for a long period of time as well.
I mean, if you look at this, though, as an American who's voting for these people, and you're relying on these people, and you're trusting these people, what does it say to new people that are coming in? You cannot trust them if they can't make an educated and wise decision to pull themselves out when they're no longer capable of serving their country.
Well, and that's the key point here. And listen, I'll just say, as a Gen Zer, I'm actually pretty sympathetic towards term limits, because I'd like to see some more representation in Congress. And I think it's been made very clear that people will not give up political power unless they are literally forced to. We wouldn't even need to have conversations about term limits if people didn't choose to become career politicians. They are supposed to be public civil servants. And that's the real problem with this story, is that Granger was supposed to be a representative for her constituents, who are real people with real needs. And for the past 6 months, they have not had an advocate in Washington. which is her sole responsibility. She deprived them of that right. She failed to do her responsibility. And I don't know who's to blame. I don't know if the family's to blame. I don't know if the staff is to blame. I don't really want to get into... Yeah,
I think
all of the above.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
the victims here are the people, the constituents she was supposed to represent. Where do they go to get their voice back?
I don't know.
Two things, though.
George
Two things, though.
Santos, he's going to run for her seat.
Yeah, exactly.
Two things, though. The people in that, they have to get rid of these people. It's okay. I beat a 12-year incumbent Republican, okay, when I first ran for Congress. It's okay to vote somebody out. They have to also make these decisions and take some responsibility as well.
But they didn't know. They didn't know where she was at.
But they need to know. They need to go figure out.
They weren't trying to find out, it seems. They were just letting it happen because that's the mentality in Washington, that if you don't show up, it's okay.
If you don't show up at your job, you get a call from
Somebody
your
would
boss
notice
saying,
after
where
6
are you?
months.
So if she hasn't come to vote on something since July, why wasn't she getting a phone call? Where are you?
I think that facade was put up there, and it also shows that the national media is not doing her job. You go and look at her website. She's chairman emeritus of the Appropriations Committee. She is in charge of all discretionary spending in the House of Representatives. You wonder why we're in so much trouble? They have somebody who hasn't shown up at their job in the last 6 months. Elon wants to get them back to their desk. That person wasn't at their desk. The other thing is there needs to be term limits for the bureaucracy. Dr. Fauci should have never sat in that seat for 40 plus years. You get too comfortable. If you're going to do term limits, do them for the bureaucracy as well.
They get way too comfortable. That's why she thought it was okay to not show up to work for 6 months. If any of us did that, we'd be fired. A Pew Research poll from earlier this year found that a staggering 87% of Americans, you put somebody in office, at some point, you need a new face. You need some fresh blood. Nancy Pelosi needs to walk off with her cane or crutch.
Mitch McConnell, it's painful to watch him sometimes when he has the moments of just complete absenteeism.
Just pure space.
Well, and Jason,
and Joe Biden.
You raised an interesting point about her seat on the Appropriations Committee, because where were her colleagues? Why didn't they say anything about this? Why did the media have to report it? Why has everyone just been completely silent on her whereabouts?
She's not the only one. I'm sorry, but Congressman Scott is on the Democratic side of the aisle. He is not able to fully function. That's my personal opinion.
And maybe they actually did know, but because the Republicans have such a slim majority, they didn't want to chance the fact that she might not have her seat. Like, there may be some deceit happening here.
But again,
people
you
very
answer to the American people.
They know. They know.
Yeah, and this is the problem, though. You answer to the American people. You do not answer to the GOP party apparatus. You do what's best for the constituents first and foremost, always.
Well, that's not what the Biden administration, they knew for years of his cognitive decline, and they covered it up. And so that's the Washington we have been dealt.